So in section 1112, what are the very discrete skills that students are going to learn and have to master? So one of the goals of this is to be able to use this almost like as a reflection or a check sheet with students, that at the beginning of the unit, you could give this to them. And then as they go through the unit, that they would be able to self-evaluate through the homework that they've done, through the quizzing that they've done, whatever kind of feedback they're getting. This is something that either, I have an introductory understanding of, it's really developing, or I've mastered that, with the goal of being able to say, I've mastered these by the time that you get to the assessment itself. So in addition to that at a glance document, they're also doing one of two things. They're either doing a curriculum map, and again, this is determined by where they are in their own division and whatever it is that the division has had them working on. So this is for an English 1 honors. You can see here the essential questions would be kind of like the driving structure for this, the kind of questions that students are going to be considering through text, discussing, and writing about. And it'll go through everything from materials. Here again are the standards. The parts that are lined out are things that are not actually happening. So again, like incredible clarity in terms of what it is that either a new teacher would need, or even administration being able to say to ourselves, kind of, where are we on this? And then the other option, instead of a map, would just be this, what we're calling a pacing guide or a scope and sequence. And this is literally just set up that this is what they're doing in a day-to-day kind of way in terms of algebra. So again, this is just for us to be able to reflect both at a very high level kind of way in terms of whole divisions, but it's also going to enable us to look more precisely at individual course teams and say, what is it that we need to do as a next step, regardless of maybe what that is. So then ultimately, after they've gone through the process of archiving, which is just simply being able to save that in a division drive where we're all able to, take a look at that and see where teams are. And then this ultimately, in terms of procedures and products, was the final document that we've shared thus far with all of the course teams. We're reminding them of the grading practices that we have in place. We're really trying to be as clear as possible to emphasize kind of that integration of the work that we're doing. One of the kind of criticisms in schools is that there's always an initiative of the year, and that's something that we definitely don't want to be doing. So just like that slide that you saw that went from building relationships all the way up to the course teamwork, is being able to make it clear like how all of this is connected. So our grading practices aren't going away. That's something that will only continue to develop further. And then the second half of the document is just really trying to lay out clearly what it is that is new for this year. And we're really hoping to try and make that as manageable and realistic as possible, because faculty are not doing this prior to teaching a unit. The expectation is to be able to have it finished at the end of a unit. So really all we're wanting them to do is gather what it is that they've done, and then ultimately, essentially, we're just putting it all in one place to be able to let us reflect kind of going forward in the future. So with that, that's all I have for you this evening. Is there any questions at all that you have?
One real quick one. What metrics would you propose using for both the staff and the students to look at to see whether this is actually working?
Well, I think that in the short term, I think it will be looking at classroom assessments. I think in the long term, ultimately, our hope would be that this would impact students' literacy in terms of standardized testing. But again, one of our biggest challenges, if you disaggregate our data, is that our kids who are EL, our kids who are SPED, we're just not at a place where we're able to make, we're not yet making the same gains that we are with, a regular ed student, nor are other schools. Like, that is not what's uncommon. But I do think really where we'll see it to begin with would be actual classroom assessments, and then probably students being able to communicate how the at-a-glance sheets and what we're doing, how that potentially, hopefully, has had a positive impact on their being able to prepare to be assessed. Yeah.
Have the students been asked to evaluate this process in the previous years? Seems very individualized, which is a plus.
I don't think that we formally, nothing's coming to mind for me, Will. Any conversations we've specifically had about how grading has impacted them. I do think one of the changes is that we've had it in place now, year 3. So I think the kids who have been here, when we're looking at our juniors and seniors, I think there's ultimately a normalization. It's kind of like when you quietly stop letting kids park on campus, then there's a huge uproar and cry about that. But then ultimately, once you go through a cycle of students, that's what becomes normal. So I think at the beginning, just anecdotally, that it was challenging to understand what that was about. But I do think looking at our retake process, looking at students in academic support and how we're able to grow that, I think it is like anecdotally showing us that the students are starting to understand that ultimately it's the assessment that matters, and really trying to make them feel more responsible and capable of controlling their grade to a certain extent. That whole self-efficacy piece that we've talked about before, it's so developmental for them, and for them to feel like they can be successful, right? There isn't an expectation that they have to learn it the first time. The whole growth mindset, that has been kind of popular for a number of years, of kids realizing that in general, you have to fail to be successful. So not looking at failure, however you want to define that, as being an end, but really a way for you to understand what it is that you can do and what you still need to learn.
It was a hot button topic 2 years ago in my student advisory committee.
Yeah?
It has since gone away, and they're fine
Oh,
with
really?
it.
Okay, good. All right, great. Thank you. It sounds wonderful.
I want to thank you for such a comprehensive presentation. This was awesome, and I loved the colors, and it was engaging. So thank you so much. Kind of hard to keep focus, so I really appreciate the way that everything was laid out. 2 things. As far as like grading, kind of piggybacking off what Lynn said, in terms of grading, I know that how do we present to parents, and have we ever really surveyed like what parents think about grading, or overall, again, just how do we present that information? Because I really do like the way that it was captured, and how specific it is. But in terms of like, is it kind of pushed out at the beginning of the year through like some sort of syllabus, or what does that process look like?
So last year, I believe it was during open house, Will and I both did grading presentations. There was one in English and one in Spanish. And then I actually did a revised version of that for all of you guys. And then at this open house, I did a 9th grade presentation where the grading component was one of the things that was included in that. Now, I've got to say, we've got, 400 and whatever freshmen, and there were probably 25 people and Rich who were in the presentation. So definitely it's not being communicated personally to everyone, but it is on every syllabus. All of that is laid out. And I think it's a great point that we could continue to try to really communicate that even more so, maybe going forward in terms of parent-teacher conferences or things like that. So the message is definitely out there. It's been communicated in writing in terms of a number of times. But I don't think you can ever over-communicate it, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I do think like sometimes, definitely something that happens, I think, across the board is over-surveying parents. So I think that certain things are lost in it.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe if we could like put it in form like of a question or something very specific that will capture a little bit more of the parents' attention, and maybe we'd get a little bit more feedback, because I do understand, parents coming to presentations sometimes isn't the most ideal thing, but I think parent-teacher conferences would be ideal. I don't know if we could do like some sort of like maybe exit survey or a Chromebook in the classroom that might capture 2 or 3 questions specific to grading, and see kind of what parents are thinking or what questions they have.
I definitely think we're always looking for feedback, and it also does feel very strategic plan-ish to me, that I'm sure will be a component of that as well, most conversations.
Perfect. And then the other final question I had, as far as like EL students, do we ever capture like what kind of formal education? I know that a lot of our students come in with very little to no documentation, or sometimes it's difficult to understand that documentation. How do we have that, how do we gather that information or have access to that history?
It's definitely, I mean, Veronica could speak much more in depth about it, but I do know that it's part of the initial process when families do come in. So not only are they gathering what they can, like you said, that has been documented, but there's also kind of some screening that goes on. And even when we place students, it's not necessarily final to begin with. That kids do move if we, give them a few weeks or a month and we realize either they are much more capable and they were shy, or that we thought something that maybe isn't in place yet. So I'd say that EL is probably one of our most flexible programs that we do have.
So it is captured through like some sort of screening tool?
Yeah, when they're coming in, that's an individual process. Yeah.
Couple questions. What is Somos?
We are. So it's the same, so we are, we go. It's the same thing. It's just the plural, somos, we go. It's just the plural of that, of the verb are. So it's we are, we go in Spanish.
Talk a lot about assessments. I'm not sure I quite understand. Sounds like different assessments, self-assessment, teacher assessments. Can you give a couple examples of
I can.
different kinds of assessments and how they get given?
Sure. Okay, so let's start at kind of the highest level and we talk about standardized assessment. So that's everything from what we were doing previously in terms of the SAT. Now we're moving to the ACT and the pre-ACT. We also do MAP testing, which is reading and math assessment. We do that in the fall and in the spring for all of our 9th through 11th graders. And that's all giving us nationally normed data. So then when we're talking about classroom assessment or a teacher assessment, that's literally going to be what we might have called a unit test, right? So an end of the unit test. But that could also look very different. So that could be an essay, that could be a Socratic seminar, that could be a project. In our government classes, when they do the open sessions and the different kinds of like large group work that they do, they're assessing. So it could be a lab report. So it's going to be definitely determined by whatever the subject area, but it's essentially the unit test in some form.
That would be graded.
Yeah, and so then those are going to be the most highly weighted in the assessment category.
Or what other assessment? I get the feeling that the students will do some self-assessment, or is that?
Sure.
not
So
quite
self-assessment is not literally going to be graded. That's just going to be what we would consider metacognition. So we're just having them reflect on either what it is that they did learn, or maybe it's looking at the process that they used. Maybe it's looking at what they should have done differently. So it could be different kinds of questions that are asking them to look and reflect at their own attitudes, work, pacing, whatever it may be. And those will be used differently in different courses and different subjects, some more frequently than others. But again, if you kind of keep going back to research, students who are tracking their own performance over time, who like literally do plot that, and I'll give you an example of where that's been happening. In the bridge classes, Emily Brown has presented here before, and one of the things that they have done there is something called a CBM, which is technically a curriculum-based measure. And to us, it would look like reading fluency. It's just a passage that would be at their grade level. And over a week, they're going to do repeated readings on that same passage with a partner. And then at the end of the week, they would be assessed, how many words can they read in the minute as opposed to how many words can they read correctly. So what those students do then is they're charting the number of words per minute correct, over a semester. So their ability to see themselves grow and to chart that is technically one of the things that can have a really significant impact on their learning. So self-assessment could look very different. I know Charles Vokes has talked about in math how he has used different colors, I believe, before to kind of communicate different targets and skills that they're developing. So the format could be very different, but essentially it's either kind of like a before, during, or after sort of reflection that helps students be more conscious of how they're thinking, what they're doing, and maybe what they should be doing.
So self-assessments are evaluated personally by the students, or are they shared with the teacher?
Yeah, no, they would definitely be shared. I mean, maybe not every single one, depending on how much is being used, but yes, the goal of it is almost to be a communication tool between them, or there may be, they may reflect on, let's say, 3 or 4 things, and maybe one of them in particular would be a focus that the whole class would kind of discuss or talk about. So it'll look differently, but yes, the teachers want to know what is it that the students believe that they can do, as opposed to maybe what they're demonstrating in an assessment. And sometimes the kids are actually harder on themselves than in reality in terms of their performance.
Are the teachers sort of personalizing the assessments, or does everybody take the same assessment and provide it? I guess I'm trying to understand the students, like you said, somewhere down the line, the students have different goals and try to accomplish different things. Is that all personalized, or in stepping back, does the teacher always look for the same group of issues?
So each course and then each unit would have a certain number of skills that students are supposed to master. So all of the kids, aside from when there might be adaptations or very rare modifications for in a special ed kind of setting, all of the kids who are taking that course are taking the same assessment. It will all look the same.
And expected to meet the
And
same
yep, everybody's
requirements.
Yes, they are. And so the only place that it might look different, where kids would have something more individualized, is we're definitely encouraging that if you're, in particular, this works well for math, if there's like one skill that a student is not able to demonstrate on a particular math test, then the teacher could just test the student on that for the retake, because there's no reason for them to do a whole entire assessment again if there's only one skill. So at that point, it might look different, but it's still one component of the same test that everyone took. So the initial assessment will have different content than the second one. They won't be identical, but it would be the same skills for both. Yeah. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for a fantastic presentation. All right, that brings us to Purchasing Policy 4:60.
Thank you. So last January, the Board of Education approved a language change to the purchase and contracts policy under 460. The intent of that language at the time was to have any expenditure over $10,000 approved by the board. After further review of that revised language, we still determined that language still is not clear. So after some review with Dr. Johansson and legal, we came up with some new language that is attached to the agenda that makes it much more clear that any contract or purchase over $10,000 will be approved by the Board of Education. This would serve as the first reading for that language update of Policy 460. And so if you could review and submit any questions prior to the second reading, that will be held at the September 17th board meeting. We'll ask the board for approval of that new language. Any questions on that?
Okay, so the intent is that that will be finalized with the September 17th second reading.
Yes.
All right, business office internal controls.
So internal controls are an important part of any organization. Those controls help to ensure board policy is followed, proper approval is obtained, accounting records are properly recorded, and vendors are paid appropriately. There are multiple layers of internal controls in place for purchasing. With the changes in the business office staff and with our new Skyward financial software, we continue to review and communicate our internal controls while also strengthening those controls. So here are just a few of those layers that we currently have in place or soon will be in place. As I just mentioned, we're going to make policy 460 even more clear, so there's no confusion on that. It's much easier for our staff to understand and to follow. We have purchasing guidelines that go out every year that are provided to all administrators, noting board policy should be followed, and that also outlines proper procedures for purchasing, reimbursements, and use of credit cards. Every staff member in the building also is provided with a shorter version of that purchasing guideline, which also references board policy. And then each employee that's issued a credit card from the district is required to sign an annual credit card agreement that also references board policy. In Skyward, we have multiple levels of approval for purchase orders and invoices, including the department head, director of business services, and the accounts payable specialist. All invoices are attached and approved in Skyward. This is a newer process starting in July 1. Past practice was stacks of paper to reviewed and approved, leaving the possibility that some pages are stuck together or paper is lost, something like that. The board has also hired a treasurer to review all the purchases and payroll. A new process that we have in Skyward is that I will be directly notified when any invoice or purchase order is entered that is more than $10,000. And then another new process that will start is that we'll send a letter to all of our vendors advising them that purchase orders are required and any service or product provided without a purchase order may not be paid. So even with all of those internal controls in place, there are rare instances where mistakes are made or policy is not properly followed. This was the case for 2 separate purchasing issues in the past months. As these issues just recently came to my attention, I wanted to share them with the board in the spirit of full transparency. First one was in an effort to brand the building, which was an initiative over the past school year. Track and field record boards were installed over the summer in the field house. Unfortunately, the order and installation occurred before any notice was given to the business office at a total cost of $16,970. This amount has not been paid to the vendor and will wait until the board approves this expense at the September 17th board meeting. The controls of the business office prevented this payment from being issued. This expense had been accounted for by the athletic department in their tentative budget plans for this upcoming school year, so it was a planned expense. The second issue arose from confusion regarding purchasing from grant funds. Last year, our special education department planned on purchasing and providing work training skills on campus to increase student awareness of work preferences and interests, as well as skill development. The Director of Specialized Services at that time planned on doing this by purchasing a practical assessment exploration system, lab, and curriculum that had components such as business, marketing, computer technology, and consumer service. The purchase was approved by SACID, and as part of the STEP grant would be 100% reimbursed to the district. Unfortunately, the director did not follow board policy for approval, likely due to the fact the purchase would be fully reimbursed. At the same time, with the transition of staff in the business office and the special education departments, and with Skyward processes simultaneously being established in the new system, this purchase and payment were inadvertently processed without approval from the Director of Business Services, myself, or the Board of Education. The purchase of this curriculum lab was $44,875. Payment was issued in June of 2024. So while these rare instances and circumstances are unfortunate, it has provided us an opportunity to further bolster the internal controls in place and reiterate expectations. As always, it is the business office's goal that board policy will be followed at all times. Administration will be asking the board to approve the payment of the track and field record boards, and then also retroactively approving the purchase of the PACE lab at the September 17th board meeting. Any questions?
I have a question. Will we get reimbursed still for that?
Or the PACE lab?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we've paid it, we'll get reimbursed.
Correct.
So that's what will happen in the long run.
Mhm.
And then, so this other item, though, was a budget in their, or a line in their budget, and so they just went ahead because they assumed it was approved, the budget was approved, correct?
Yeah, it was part of their tentative budget that they walked through with me. They just got a little ahead of themselves
Okay.
and didn't follow that board policy, but it was in their budget as planned.
All purchase orders have to be signed by you to be valid, is that
Correct, but
And vendors will accept so were these purchase orders signed by somebody else or just
it's
handed
an
to the
automatic
vendor?
signature in Skyward.
Oh, that's convenient.
It wasn't, this one was an automatic signature?
For the Pace Lab, yes.
Oh, what about the first one?
The first one, there was no purchase order.
And that was not following the policy of having a purchase order for a purchase.
Correct.
A process to keep that from automatically signing things?
Yeah.
Question too.
It does seem a little dangerous.
It's a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
dangerous.
Well, so ideally, when the system is set up properly, I'm approving everything. It's already approved by me, like we can see in Skyward that I already approved it, that our accounts payable specialist approved it, that the department head approved it. And so then the signature on the purchase order itself is just a formality of showing the vendors that it went through that approval process and it was signed. So the issue with the Pace Lab portion of that was the approval process wasn't quite set up correctly in Skyward. And it was a purchase order group, that STEP grant, that it's rarely used. Maybe we have 1 or 2 purchases for that STEP grant that goes through every year. And so it was a purchase order group that wasn't set up properly yet.
That system is in place and was in place when these two things happened, or is that system now in place?
Now in place for the Pace Lab.
So it was in place for one, but not the other, because the other one was older, correct?
The one for the track and field record boards,
Yeah.
that process, there wasn't a purchase order in place, so that the plan, the process and procedures were in place prior to that, and it was communicated out prior to that. The athletic department just got ahead of themselves and didn't follow that policy.
There's 2 key stopgaps here. One is the communication to the vendor to let them know that we will not honor anything without a purchase order. And then 2, the other stopgap is anything that's over $10,000. Dan gets a notification and it pops up on his screen that he has the final approval, so nothing can go forward without his final approval. So those are the 2 big stopgaps that are put in place as a result of these things that happened last year.
I guess I'm just trying to understand how somebody at a lower level, they just go out and order all these things, and it just comes in and gets installed, and then at some point, they're saying, I need a check now, and
So the vendor that they
like there's
used,
nobody else looking at any of this and saying, where did those come from? I mean, am I being naive? But
no, so the vendor that we use that they use for the record boards is a vendor that we've used in the past.
so it
and
all seemed normal at the
It
time?
did. It all seemed normal. Again, they just got ahead of themselves a little bit and didn't go through the proper procedure.
For something under $10,000, what is the process that regulates that? Is that
The process is the same, other than if it's more than $10,000, it comes in front of the board for approval.
okay? But everything goes to you then?
Yes.
Okay. So do we have some kind of stop, and this is coming from business issues, but do we have a way of checking that when we place an order, we're not subsidizing a drug cartel or something? I mean, where I work, they're very sensitive about validating suppliers and things like that, making sure that they're not necessarily on the level, but not being subsidized by third world parties or, things like that. Do we have
Vetting
any?
these companies, is that what you're
Well,
asking?
yeah, vetting like very thoroughly. Do we have any mechanism? I don't know that it would ever happen in our field, but do we have a way of checking that when we have a supplier come in and offer us something that it's up and up,
So all new vendors are approved by the board,
regardless of
regardless
much we're
of
spending.
dollar amount, correct? There's new vendor that's approved by the board anytime there is one in a consent agenda.
Okay, but when we approve a vendor, we don't know that much about the vendor, other than you're telling us, here's a vendor.
Yeah, the vendors are somewhat vetted. It depended on the dollar amount. If it's over $500, then we should have multiple quotes. They should be looking for best practice, best pricing. And all vendors that deal with school districts should be not part of, there's a department that they should be allowed to use to work with school districts. But if there's, as far as like, if it's a couple $100 or something like that, specifically vetted, probably not.
Thank you for the background, and thank you for your diligence in updating the controls.
Thank you.
Board agenda financials.
And so the current documents provided in the Board of Education and the board agenda are, they're time consuming. They require manual calculations from our staff, and then they're just cumbersome for our business staff to put together. So in review of those documents, we would like to offer similar documents, similar reports that provide similar information, but are generated directly from Skyward. We hope that you would find them much easier to read and easier to process. And so the reports that we're looking at were the statement of position financial report, the statement of revenue expenditures year-to-date ending, and the grant reports, the revenue and expense number 1 and 2, which are pretty much the same reports, but just in different, and just in a different way. So in your agenda, you can see those reports side by side. If you can take a look at those. We plan to start this format at the September 17th meeting. And so if you do have any feedback, please let us know before then. Any questions at this time regarding those documents?
I guess my question is, how many of the board members pour through those line by line and actually study that we even need that information?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
I do.
You should ask that.
Rich said it, I didn't say it.
I actually like the new documents. I can't say how much detail I've read them yet.
Yeah, if it's easier on the staff, I'm fine with it.
They are easier to read.
It makes a lot of sense to utilize the software. We just spent how much money on getting to.
Yeah, and it was, Chris Olson had been here for a long time, and she could put those reports together very quickly. When new staff came in, they're like, what is this? And so it's taken her some time to go through that, and I even went through some of those documents. I'm like, wow, it's too much. And so, yeah, it'll be much easier to go through Skyward, hit that button, similar information. And again, I do think they're easier to read.
I think the biggest thing
Chris,
too.
let her know that we had to,
I think anytime you can eliminate the human element from the budget numbers, I think it's a good thing, because it's one less area that could get missed potentially.
just don't count on it 100%.
As long as
I guess,
Always somebody's finger in the background that can move.
the only caution I'd have is if we do that, we should just audit every month 1 or 2 line items just to make sure that we're, staying rational.
Yeah, and that's done anyways, Rich.
Part of your internal controls, I would
That's
expect.
right.
All right, then, efficiency is a good thing.
Okay.
Contract renewals.
So you have an updated document at table for this item as part of our process for renewing the contracts. We have 4 contract renewals that we'll want to bring to the September 17th board meeting for classwork. That's Classic over there. Discovery Education, Pearson, and then the Kajik Company. Again, we'll bring that to the board for approval at September 17th. Any questions on that?
Right, new contracts.
So the Specialized Services Department is requesting the purchase of Goalbook. Goalbook Toolkit guides educators working with specialized student populations to vary the levels of instructional support. This supports teachers with designing learning goals and instructional plans that respond to different ways students learn and their individual needs. Goalbook Toolkit empowers teachers to identify learning barriers and apply effective strategies based on research to ensure all students can access the general curriculum. All of the content in Goldbook is aligned to state standards and research-based frameworks for differentiated instruction. That annual cost for Goldbook is $14,161. Quote for a 3-year membership, which will be invoiced annually, is $42,483, and this purchase of this program is fully funded with the IDEA grant. So we'll be asking the board to approve the purchase of Goldbook at the September 17th board meeting. Any questions?
Just generically, we're bringing on a lot of automated software and things. Do we have an assessment that says we're spending $15,000 on this package and it's going to save us this much in effort and work and people and things like that? I mean, and are there older software packages that we're eliminating, getting rid of those subscriptions and things? Somewhere along the line, you keep adding stuff, but what's the benefit other than saying, well, it's new software, so it must be better?
Yeah, this is a software that's, I wish I could remember I know that in the IDEA grant, they were removing a software that is no longer being used, and they replaced it with this one. I wish I could remember the name of that software, but I don't.
I guess it would be good maybe once a year to look at what we're benefiting from for the stuff that we're adding on. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be labor, could be improvement, accuracy, things like that, but we keep buying all this stuff, and I don't know where the value is, other than I'm assuming it must be good, but I don't like to assume.
Some indication that it's replacing something else or new to serve a particular purpose would probably be helpful.
Sure. We can look into that.
You would probably need a software package for that.
Probably. We have.
Let's not go there.
That'll be at the next Cal meeting.
All right, thermosystems quote.
All right, so we have 2 chillers in the building. We have a large one and a small one. The smaller one is currently leaking refrigerant and is not in service. That was a chiller that was installed during the referendum project, and it's still under warranty. So Thermosystems, the ones installed that, and so we went back to the Thermosystems to see about inspecting the chiller and providing that scope of work. As you know, the superintendent sent out an email regarding that chiller, that we're trying to get that operable. And we're still trying to schedule that, as their Thermosystems is booked out a little ways, and we've still not been able to get that scheduled. I'm also double checking with DLA, our architects, and Berg, who's our engineers through DLA, to confirm that it's still under warranty. We believe a portion of it at least should be, but we're double checking on that. So we're assuming that work is going to get done before the board meeting comes on the 17th. So this will be a retroactive approval of the repair of that chiller for $11,239.
So is the expectation we're paying the amount to get it fixed, and then once we determine warranty status, they're going to refund us back a certain amount of that?
Correct, more than likely.
Is there any reason why it's not done the other way around? Like it's under warranty and you don't have to pay?
Well, we're checking with Berg on that, but we wanted to make sure that we get it fixed. If we have to get it fixed first and then figure out the warranty later, we'll do that to get reimbursed for it, but we want to make sure we get that chiller up and running. We've been fine in the building with just the large chiller, but we want to make sure that the small one gets running too.
Considering the time of year, and you never know if we're going to get hammered again.
Labor and stuff like that, you know. Is that new refrigerant or old refrigerant? Is that, do you know?
I don't know, Rich.
Okay.
Are you worried about it pooling on the floor somewhere?
Well,
It's not pulling on the floor anywhere.
requirements to move to
Yeah.
more recent
Oh,
refrigerants.
right.
Yeah.
Given that it was a
But
referendum
it was
project, I would
fairly
imagine
new.
it's
It's
probably one of the
newer,
newer
No, but
ones.
to Rich's point, there's I think there's new legislation out there about new
Yeah.
refrigerant.
Yeah, and I think you got 2 years to do that. So I guess one of the questions is, you know, if we have to pay, do we just replace the chiller and be up to date on that? I guess I'd check into the regulations.
Yeah, it's a new chiller. I hope we don't have to do that, but we'll make sure
We're
we're
gonna have to one way or the other.
yeah.
Worth asking the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when they come in to repair it, they'll evaluate all that, wouldn't you think?
Unless you ask, they might just come in, fix it, and leave, so it's worth asking the question.
Well, that's the question.
There isn't that much time to update, especially a public building.
More importantly, why are they not called air conditioning units instead of chillers?
It was more expensive.
No, no.
Oh, okay,
They can charge more for chillers?
okay.
Parents' electric proposal.
All right, so we're going to be utilizing the upper maintenance garage for an outdoor space and larger construction lab space for our geometry and construction classroom. But we're in need of some better lighting in that space with exit lighting and emergency lighting. And so we asked Terrence Electric, who's completed other projects for the district, to provide a proposal for the work. And that's $11,755. That also includes that exit lighting and emergency lighting for that class.
What is the upper garage?
So we have the garage down over here on the south. That the bottom half of that is our maintenance garage, where we store all of our maintenance maintenance vehicles and equipment. And then there's on the upper side of it, on the opposite side, is just it was a garage that we used for storage, and so we cleared that garage out.
It's still ground level, but we call it the upper garage. It's not a two-story garage, right?
Correct. It's not a two-story garage.
Oh.
VeriQuest poster printer quote.
Our CTE department has a poster printer for Pathway in Education and Early Childhood Education courses in Child Development 1 and 2 and Intro to Education. Their current poster printer is broken. So they would like to replace that with similar model. The old one was 10 years old. The CTEI grant will fund the purchase of this. So I'll be asking for the board to approve that at the September 17th board meeting for $10,955.99.
Something we'd be better off leasing than buying, so that we get service and things like that.
The last one lasted for 10 years, and it's funded by the grant. Potentially, if we were purchasing that ourselves, we might lease that. Might be a better option. But the grants, they don't really like leases.
So the grant would just cover the purchase?
Yeah, they like the purchase outright.
Yours is good.
FY25 tentative budget follow-up.
So in August, at the Committee of the Whole meeting, I presented a tentative budget for the 2024-25 fiscal year. At the September 17th meeting, I will present the final budget for the 24-25 fiscal year, which will include changes to the tentative budget as allowed by school code. At this time, I do have changes to the evidence-based funding, which will add $466,000, and then a reduction of the corporate property personal replacement tax of $359,000. We also have some addition of local expenditures for, we're going to do some food service during the winter and spring breaks. It's also entirely possible that I'll have some other changes before presenting the final budget at the September meeting. But so just a reminder, if there's any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we will have a public hearing at the September 17th board meeting to formally approve the budget.
The changes.
FY 2025 Appendix B recommendation.
So the Appendix B committee meets at least 3 times annually and held its first meeting of the year last week, I believe it was. During that meeting, we'd like to audit the entire matrix and then address any immediate needs for the school year. And one immediate need did come up. So this year's winter drama performance, rather than being a play, is going to be a musical. And so there's a request for, and it's a one-time request, not an ongoing request, for a choreographer, since it will be a musical. This tends to come up around every 6 to 7 years, and it just depends on the programming that's scheduled. And so We will plan to make that request at the board meeting on September 17th. And barring any discussion or concerns here, I would like to post it as anticipated in the meantime, so that hopefully we can have that new choreographer approved at the September 17th board meeting as well.
At an in-house position?
It'll depend. We would take candidates either internal or external, and we do have some sponsors that are external.
And will there also be a spring musical?
Yes.
They have both schedules, yes.
Yes, I wish I knew off the top of my head the entire schedule, but Mr. Begovic keeps a
The winter-
wonderful program going throughout the year, and I know there's some really big performances coming up.
So we're not replacing the spring musical? with
No,
the
no,
winter
no, this
musical,
is just,
adding one?
right, just a different take on the winter one.
The winter one, they're doing 6.
Yeah.
And the spring one, they're doing Sister Act.
Great. I'm glad Bob's on top of it, because I've read the program before, and it looks like there's some really good pieces coming up this year.
All right, then, that brings us to first reading of the Press Plus issue 116.
The Illinois Association of School Boards Press Plus Policy Service has distributed issue 116, Policy Recommendations. Our district leadership team has reviewed the recommendations and have summarized our suggestions on the summary sheet. After receiving feedback on these recommendations, we'll place this on the consent agenda for the second reading and approval for the September 17th, 2024 regular Board of Education meeting.
Questions or comments about the policies?
I'm on a roll tonight. As I'm reading through the policies, I realize that there's a lot of positions that are important legally that we have somebody assigned or designee. My concern is, how do we have qualified designees and know that where we're delegating this, if it ever wound up in court, the issue might be, well, that person you designated wasn't qualified, didn't have the ability, the training, whatever. So I guess we don't have a deep bench. We don't have a lot of people to designate. I'm concerned that, we know who we're designating and there's some credibility to the designation, or we don't designate and write in. Press doesn't deal with just us. So I'm wondering, are we better off not designating all of these important positions and protecting ourselves?
Well, I mean, we don't have a deep bench, but the bench we have are all-stars, Rich. So as it pertains to this right here, Julie is that all-star that we talk about that is designated for a lot of these as a compliance officer, and she has received the proper training.
Okay, but there's nothing that documents that. It just says or designee. So we don't have like a list of here are our assigned positions and here are our designees.
It is noted in that policy who they are.
All the policies where everything is optioned for designee.
Where well, in these particular policies, I haven't reviewed every single policy to see.
I mean, it reminded me that almost every policy has so-and-so or designee, and I'm like, well, how do we know where we're delegating that is the right person to do that? I don't question who we have. I sort of question down the line, somebody gets designated, they designate somebody, pretty soon, you have somebody that maybe wasn't qualified. There's no control on that.
I think the control from my position is who I decide to designate as that, in this case, compliance officer. You don't have the ability to designate a designated position to someone else, if that makes sense.
If that's the way it's,
so
if
there
that's
is
the
there is
procedure
that
that's
control.
followed.
Yeah, there is that control there to ensure that it's not getting kicked down the line, and I don't know who is that designee.
I guess somewhere along the line, we should qualify that.
In every policy you'd like us to?
Well, just maybe a blanket statement that, anything that's called for like superintendent or designee, the superintendent knows exactly who's been designated, and that there's no further designation or things like that. We wouldn't necessarily need to address it on every policy, but sort of a rider that says one of our first entries into the quality manual is, there's one designee, because it doesn't protect you down the line anywhere else. Maybe it's a stretch, but, weird things happen.
Would the designee be you, the superintendent?
I would be the default designee if I have not assigned it. So in this particular case, it's Julie as it pertains to
Right.
policy 116.
Uh-huh.
Her name is attached to that because she's completed the required training to be the compliance officer.
The only other place I believe I've seen or designee, it always starts with superintendent or designee.
Designee.
So be carefully under Dr. Johansson's control to be aware of who that is. And if he doesn't designate, then it would fall to him.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it does say
Good
like
question.
the complaint manager or designee. Yeah. But we have 2 complaint managers, so it could go to either or, right? So that's kind of your backup plan in that?
Yeah, and Len and I work closely on that together so that we're aware of how that process would flow.
Are we comfortable with the level of control?
No. Not necessarily just the 4 or 5 we're looking at, but everywhere through the policy manual or designees. And I don't know that everybody knows specifically who that designee would be.
You're concerned that there's not enough internal controls within the superintendent's office to ensure?
Yeah, I don't know what the controls are.
Any other board members share this concern?
Would it be, I'm trying to think, wouldn't be addendum or something, but something you could attach to all the policies that would just be like a one sheet saying, these are their titles, this would be a designee with a name?
Maybe that's a question to
Would that-
our lawyer, how you protect that if we're ever in a position where we have to defend ourselves, that we can say we did due diligence in designee.
Is there some kind of a best practice for districts handling this sort of thing? Because all districts have these kind of policies with designees.
Correct. And they don't specifically name the designee in the policy itself. So recommendation, and I can
I
bring it
think
back.
with one line or one paragraph at the beginning that includes all policies, anywhere there's designee referred to, here's how we do it.
Sounds like a good start is at least ask the attorney what they see as best practice, because they see policies all over the place. Anything else about the policies? So we're good with the first reading. All right then, before we move into closed session, I'd like to ask board members, please fill out the governance survey. It closes on Thursday, and having everybody fill it out as completely, well, with your perspectives as completely as accurately as possible will help make the time that we spend together on the 17th that much more productive and focused, because we'll be able to focus in on these are the perceived areas that everybody seems to have concern over.
Where is that survey? It hasn't popped up in front of me.
There was an email, and there were actually a couple emails. In fact, there was another one that went out, I think it was this morning, that highlighted,
Yeah.
this is the link to hit the survey.
Also in the weekly, well, there was one in the weekly from me, and then there were 2 previous, and then another one this morning
Mine from Nancy.
from Nancy.
Yes, so just look in either the new email or look back at the chain of emails, but there's a link in there for it.
I'll check. I get 500 emails a day, so.
I hear you. All right, at this point, we'll be moving into closed session. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education hold a closed session at 8:12 PM for the purposes of exception number 2, collective negotiating matters, specifically support staff negotiations, and exception number 12, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed or is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, specifically Winfield TIF.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer?
Aye.
Mr. Ramus?
Aye.
Ms. Munoz?
Aye.
Mr. Nagel?
Aye.
Mr. Sake? Mr. Suniga?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We'll be going into executive session. Why don't we take 5? blinking. Let us know when it's live.